CHAKRAS.
Each time you are aroused, each time you are feeling that horniness or that sensual energy moving through you, making an active choice to feel it and connect to it, either by yourself or with your lover, but then not expending it, not releasing it, not getting to the release and then the depletion. Taking that energy that was stimulated through the sexual act and then using it for something else creative, using it for your business, using it for your artistic expression, using it for your writing, using it for your poems, using it for your singing. You get the idea, right? So the tip here is you channel the sexual energy rather than expending it in the sexual act, channel it into other creative pursuits. Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Before we continue this beautiful chat today, wonderful souls, I need to jump in here to share something really exciting. If you've been following these episodes or you've been following me on social media, you know that I am in the process of releasing my first book, Your Cosmic Love Antenna, Define, Embody, and Emit Your Unique Frequency of Love. And at the time of this episode release, pre-orders are now open. If you have been pulled to this show, if you're looking to understand the what, the how, and the why of love, if you're looking to apply some of the tools connected to your chakras, inner child, releasing religious trauma, ancestral healing, emotional release, and so much more, then this beautiful expression from my heart to yours is for you. If you are looking to channel more of your unique gifts and the divine frequency that you are, these pages will open all of this up. And if you're interested, all you need to do is go to cosmicloveantenna.com. That's cosmicloveantenna.com. And you can pre-order this book right now. If you pre-order, click on that link, put in your email, you're going to get access to some special gifts that I'm only offering to those who get in before I release it fully. These gifts are going to be some more channeled meditations, activations, and some other surprises from my heart to yours. So head over to cosmicloveantenna.com, pre-order this beautiful expression, and I can't wait to hear how it shifts your life. If you're listening to this after pre-order sales, that same link can be also used to go to the direct purchase link. Sending love, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of this episode today. Good morning, evening, afternoon, beautiful beings. Welcome back to another podcast recording, to another Solo-sode with your host, Harrison, here talking about a topic that I know is going to hit your heart with the intention of, as always here on the show, pulling back the layers, restricting health, alignment, and your mystical, spiritual love. And today is a continuation of the sexual energy, the chakras and your sexual energy series that I'm doing. Today, we are going to be moving this energy forward up from the root into the sacral space. And I'm going to get into all of that in 2 seconds. But as always here, a bit of foundation, bit of intention to start this dance that we're going to do together. If you're watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you have comments, questions, or just want to add in your voice today, please leave it in the comments and I will include you in the show if it flows in, if you have something on your heart. If you're listening to this on the podcast player, please share this out with a friend, a family member, a lover that you think it can support and guide. And when you leave your feedback and your love over on Apple and Spotify in reviews, it helps the show build. So I'd really appreciate that. So today, a bit of a why listen? What is the purpose of this chat today? Today I'm going to be going into some chakra tools and tips to activate your sexual energy. Your chakras are gateways. And today we're going to be focusing on the sacral chakra as the gateway to your sexual energy. We're going to be talking about sexuality, emotional balance, the impact of guilt and shame, religious trauma, inner child sexual identity, and so much more sacral sexual goodness. So stick around. And this conversation within these solo-sodes always is very practical. So I'm not just sharing knowledge, I'm sharing ways for you to change today. So open your hearts and get ready to dive in. I want to share here, as I always do on these solo-sodes, a beautiful review from the community. That is you. This soul has gone onto Apple and left some feedback. This is from the beautiful Bill. Bill says, "What a wonderful show. Harrison and his wonderful guests help deepen our awareness of who we really are. Pure love. I highly recommend." Thank you, Bill. I appreciate the beautiful comments and love received. And again, if you want to leave your feedback, best way to do that is over on Apple. All right. So welcome, Suzanne. I see you in the Facebook chat. Welcome, my beautiful friend. And excited to have you here, a part of this. What I'm going to do here before I get into all things sacral, I'm going to give a sort of underline here about why this is important. Why do I even want to talk about the chakras and your sexual energy? For many reasons, but the one that comes to mind first to share with all of you is that your sexual energy is your life force. Your sexual energy is your creation energy. Your sexual energy is your divinity in many ways. And your chakras are the bridge that connects this energy to your holistic being. So what I mean by that is you are not just a physical entity. You have an emotional, mental, and spiritual side. And the chakras as a tool set, as you can see in the banner of my show, they are the bridge. They are the gateways to your holistic being. So if we set the intention today of activating our sexual energy, in my opinion, my experience, doing it through the lens of the chakras, through practical tools within each of them, is the best way to meet that sexual energy intention. Okay, so I hope that hits your heart. I'd recommend you go listen to part 1 of this chat. At the time of this live recording, I'm actually releasing it on the podcast today, so you can listen to part 1 after this. I'd also recommend you go listen to my original chakra episodes way back on, I think, episode 3 and 5 of this show in your podcast player. And that gives you even more general guidance on the chakras. All right. So I'm going to jump straight into it today. I'm going to get into all things sacral now. And I'm going to flow here through all the themes of the sacral chakra. For people new to these energy centers, your sacral chakra is located above your sexual organs, below your belly button. That is the energetic field. That is your sacral space. And the sacral space governs a large portion of your being. And I'm going to be speaking about those different aspects. And within those aspects, connecting it to your sexual energy and giving you tools to apply to open up this sacral space and thus expand your sexual relations, either with yourself or with someone that you decide to be intimate with. Okay, so the first theme here of the sacral space is emotional balance. And I'm going to be very transparent and direct here with all of you beautiful people listening and watching. We could do a whole series just on this alone, emotional balance. As a collective at large, most of us are not emotionally balanced. Most of us, myself included, for a very long time, rather suppressing our emotions, or we're becoming identified by them. We're not in the balance. And the sacral space is the part of our energetic anatomy and our energetic being where we first come into relation with this emotional balance or imbalance. And when we connect this to our sexual interactions, this can lead to either an expansive interaction, beautiful, loving, open, sensitive, or it can lead to contraction. It can lead to withdrawal. It can lead to, I'm going to talk about this later, but it can lead to guilt and shame and many things that we experience. And the body, the physiology expresses this. The body keeps score. So as an example, if we are emotionally imbalanced, such as, I'll speak for myself, suppressing emotion, suppressing feelings, then one of the ways the physiology within the human body will express itself is through sexual dysfunction, unable to get an erection, premature ejaculation, right? These are some examples, but this is how the body keeps score of this emotional imbalance. So what is the solution here? The solution, and I want to make this super clear, the awareness of this in itself is a solution. I'm going to share a quote with you from Rupert, is it Rupert Sheldrake? I might be misquoting, but the quote itself is, the act of observation is an act of creation unto itself. The act of observation is an act of creation unto itself. And what does that mean? What that means is by purely observing the thing that we wish to change, changes it. This is the observer effect in quantum science lens. So what I'm getting at here, your first sacral chakra sexual tip is observing where you are either repressing your emotions in your interactions with the partner or yourself, or where you are becoming identified by your emotions, where you're becoming the shame, the guilt, the anger. Just that observation. This is what mindfulness is, right? Just that observation will help you de-identify and or release the emotion that needs to be released. Okay, so I would equate this to connecting back into your divine feminine flow. Most of us are heavy in the divine masculine, very structured, very secure, very get stuff done. That's needed. It's beautiful. But what we also need is the divine flow, is the divine feminine flow through the sacral space and the release of the emotions. And we can do this in the sexual act, or we can do it prior or after the sexual act. Speaking of divine feminine flow here, still within this emotional balance part of the sacral, the next tip I would give, practical tip, to allow and cultivate this sexual energy is getting into a healthy relationship with your tears. What is one of the representations of emotional balance? What is one of the physical representations of emotional balance? It is through the release of tears, through the crying, through water expressing from your eyes. So the next point I want to make here is coming to a healthy acceptance around your crying. And I speak to everyone, I say this, but I speak specifically to maybe a lot of the men tuning in. If you were like me and you were told as a little boy growing up, boys shouldn't cry, boys shouldn't be emotional, full stop, but boys shouldn't cry, boys shouldn't be sensitive. For a very long time, potentially you held these tears in. For a very long time, you didn't allow yourself to cry. So getting into a loving, accepting relationship around your tears and making it a ritual And I'm going to share one of my rituals around tears that I do almost every single day. We don't just cry through heavy emotional experiences. We also cry due to just energetic release. That's what crying is in many ways. From a emotional and energetic spiritual lens, crying is an energetic release. So one of my practices is I get out onto the earth, I drop into meditation, I feel the sun on my skin, and I do a chakra cleanse. But within that chakra cleanse and dropping into each of the energy centers, the sacral included, there will be a release that I have. There'll be some tears coming down my face. And this is very intentional. It happens at the same time, within the same space every day. And a big reason for this is because I'm allowing it to happen. I'm allowing it to happen, and I'm setting the intention for it to happen. And we can all do this. Crying doesn't always come, especially in the masculine body, doesn't always come just with, let's say, a very hyper emotional interaction. Crying can come through yawning as well. Yawning is both a physiological reaction to sleep deprivation and not having enough rest, and a energetic release. So many of you listening, I know a lot of you are light workers, energy workers, healers. You would have experienced when you've received some kind of work on yourself or you've done it with someone else, one of the symptoms of energy work is yawning and tears. So it's important to embrace this practice as a way to emotionally balance, open that sacral space, and allow more of your sexual energy to flow. It's been a big shift in my life, in my practice. The final little tip here around emotional balance in your sacral space is the act of allowing yourself to be witnessed. What do I mean by this? One way that we can come back to emotional balance in the sacral space and thus start to expand our sexual energy. And Suzanne, I see your comments. You're welcome, my friend. One way that we can balance this emotional energy is to actively allow ourselves to be held in a space of love by another. And I'll take this further. Not just be held in a space of love, but be held in a space of love while you are being emotional, while you are experiencing anger, while you are experiencing guilt, while you are experiencing grief. Just this action, just this choice to allow yourself to be witnessed. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to critique you. They don't have to give comments. If you would like that, lean in. But just the container that is being made of love for you to be emotional expands this sacral space, expands and releases. So we can all do this. We all have someone in our life, whether it's a family member, a friend, a lover, a professional, a coach, a mentor, whoever it is. We all have someone that we can ask to hold space for us, to be witnessed in our emotions, so our sacral space can expand and thus our sexual energy can move. Okay, I want to make this super clear, and this will continue through some other tips I'm going to give today. Your sacral space governs a big portion of this sexual energy and is the foundation of this emotional being that moves the rest of your body. So these two things aren't separate. If you're reading my new book, I refer to this as your sacral tree, right? Your sacral tree has a root system of this creation energy that you are. And it then comes up through the branches of the tree into your sexual energy, into your creative expressions, dance, singing, artwork in some form, your creative relationships that you make, your relationship with money. It all comes back into this sacral space. Okay, so hold that in your heart as we continue here. For everyone joining live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, welcome. If you have comments, questions, and things that bubble up, as always, you can leave them in the comment section. I'll include you in the show if you have something to ask. I'm going to keep it flowing here now. So we're going to continue with the sacral themes to expand your sexual energy. Next up here is sexuality itself. Okay, so the theme of your sexual identity within the sacral space. And it may seem obvious, but I'll just restate it. Our relationship with our sexual identity and our sexual being will support our sexual energy. How we see ourselves sexually, positively or negatively, will impact whether or not our sexual energy flows in this sacral space. So I want to speak about a couple of elements here to be aware of and that you can clear when it comes to the sacral space and your sexuality. The first is the emotions and the feelings of guilt and shame. In my experience, feelings, emotions, they hold in your body. They're everywhere. They're in your tissues. Your tissues hold your issues. The body keeps score. However, due to your chakra system, there are certain areas of your being that resonate with particular emotional frequencies. I'd encourage everyone to tune into the Hawkins scale of consciousness to understand what emotional frequencies are. But without going into that, I'll make it simple and say guilt and shame has a habit of holding itself in this sacral space. So if you have experienced any kind of guilt and shame in relation to your sexual being, your sexual identity, your sexual choices, your sexual actions, and you haven't released this guilt and shame, and you've suppressed it and ignored it with no judgment, right? We all do this, but you've done this. Then this is impacting your sexual energy. Full stop. So again, awareness itself is key here to bring awareness to the guilt and shame that you hold in this sacral space. The next step is to start to go deeper into the layers of this guilt and shame and asking yourself, where does it come from? Where did it stem from? While it is not so important for us to get lost in the stories and the past, it is important to see how they are rippling into the present. Because I'll be very clear, once again, we don't need to go looking. These manifestations will be showing up in our life in some form or another. So what I'd encourage you to do is look in your relationships where you are seeking to express your sexual energy and ask yourself, is there guilt and shame that is manifesting? And if there is, take it further and ask, it's not connected to this person. It's not connected to this friend, this lover. They're triggering it, but it has a deeper root. And this is where we can start to pull this root out. Okay, and we can start to soothe and heal and move on from this root. So there are many possibilities for these roots in my experience. Many ways in which this guilt and shame is seated. And I speak about more of them in a bit in relation to the inner child. But the one I want to focus on here in this moment is religious trauma. Religious suppression, religious guilt and shame for your sexual energy, for your sexual identity, for the sexual being that you are. And I've done many episodes on this, and I encourage you to go back. I'll put them in the show notes on ancestral healing and religious trauma. But what I want to bring your attention to here in this moment is whether you are religious, in a religious community in this lifetime or not, there is a very high likelihood that you have some kind of religious sexual suppression or religious guilt and shame around your sexual being. So the key here, the tip here, the practical tool here is to hold this in your awareness and ask yourself, right? I call this the becoming the ancestral breaker of chains. In this instance, the ancestral breaker of religious sexual guilt and shame, right? That is in you. So you can ask yourself in that moment that you feel guilt and shame, does it have this frequency? Is this story playing? It most likely will be a story along the lines of, I am sinful for expressing my sexuality. I am dirty for connecting to my sexual lover. I am broken for connecting to my sensual essence. Right? These are very simple examples, but your story might be similar or slightly nuanced. The key here, though, is to observe the story, notice it in your body, probably connected to the emotion of guilt and shame, then making the choice to release it, breaking that belief, breaking that contract, breaking that vow that you took however long ago. Another thing that you could apply here, another tool and tip, is writing it down, is journaling around it, journaling around the story, bringing your conscious awareness to it, naming it and letting it go. Naming the story that you are sinful for connecting to your sexual energy, right? Writing that down. I hold guilt and shame around connecting to my sexual being because I feel sinful, because I feel broken, because I feel dirty, right? Whatever it is. Writing it down, journaling it, feeling it in your body, and then letting it go. So I'll end that one there because I could talk about this one for a very long time. But I just want you to have that in your awareness around your sacral space. And many of you listening and watching may be holding on to this unconsciously. By simply bringing conscious awareness to it, we can release it. The next tip here, tool, awareness around your sacral space and your sexual energy is, and this is still under the sexuality theme of the sacral space. I spoke earlier about emotional balance and the divine feminine and the need for the divine feminine. Here now in sexuality, I want to bring your awareness to the opposite polarity, the divine masculine, and how most of us, whether we are a physical male or a physical female, most of us are heavy in the masculine, the divine masculine, in many ways, but specifically in this sexuality arena of the sacral space, specifically when it comes to our senses around sexuality. And I'm going to use the example of pornography here for a moment, just to highlight this point. We could have a whole conversation around the value of pornography or not. That is not my intention here. But what I want to pull out of pornography is that what pornography highlights is the masculine of the sexual act. Pornography highlights the hard and fast divine masculine side of the sexual interaction. And again, we're not here to push that away and ignore that. But what we must ask is it balanced? Is there divine feminine within that arena? The answer for most pornography is no. So I want all of you listening to bring awareness to your relationship to pornography, either presently or in the past. Because based off that dynamic, that relationship, your sexual interaction, your sexual energy might be flowing heavily into the divine masculine, only into the divine masculine, and you aren't allowing yourself to understand and see that the beautiful sexual act, especially through the sacral space, deserves to be both. It deserves to be the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So I bring up pornography as an example here today because if you're like me, I was exposed to a lot of it, just being totally frank. And that shaped my relationship around my sexual energy, my sexual interactions, my sexual expression. So for you here in this moment, as you're interacting and listening and tuning in, what is your relationship with pornography? What has it been in the past? And are you still allowing yourself to be, I don't want to say programmed, but molded by its energetic imbalance? Because if you are, then you deserve to change that. You deserve to have the divine masculine side of it, but also add in the divine feminine. And that goes back to the emotional balance that we spoke about earlier. Okay. So I'll wrap that one up there, but just keep that in your awareness, the awareness of your relationship to pornography through the sexuality theme of the sacral space can really do a lot of healing and soothing and releasing. Okay. So next up here, within this sacral chakra and sexual energy dance that we're doing today, we've talked about emotional balance. We've talked about sexuality. I'm going to go through the next two here relatively quickly because they're pretty short, but they are still important. So the next theme of the sacral space, with the intention of expanding a sexual energy, is procreation/creation. Procreation/creation. And it will be a surprise to no one to understand that the sacral space, one of its themes is creation itself, the creation of life in terms of a baby in the womb, but just creation energy at large. So a practice and a tip here to expand this theme of the sacral space is allowing yourself to be creative through sexual energy. And what I mean by this is, if you're like me, you may have spent a big portion of your sexual life with the understanding that once you feel aroused or you have sexual energy moving through you, it must be used within the sexual act. It must be released. It must be expended within the sexual act. And do not get me wrong, there is a time and place to do that. But when it comes to our creation energy, we must understand that when we have sexual energy moving through us, it is creation energy. They are one and the same. So what I'm saying here is one way to expand your sexual energy is to use it in non-sexual ways, is to use your sexual energy to be creative. So what's a very practical way of doing this? What's a tool? What's an understanding? Well, each time you are with your lover, or you're either doing this by yourself, because again, remember, all of these sexual energy chakra tips today, they can be done with someone else or by yourself. Each time you are aroused, each time you are feeling that horniness or that sensual energy moving through you, making an active choice to feel it and connect to it, either by yourself or with your lover, but then not expending it, not releasing it, not getting to the release and then the depletion. Taking that energy that was stimulated through the sexual act and then using it for something else creative. using it for your business, using it for your artistic expression, using it for your writing, using it for your poems, using it for your singing. You get the idea, right? So the tip here is to you channel the sexual energy rather than expending it in the sexual act, channel it into other creative pursuits. Because this is what you are. You are an innately creative being. And when you use the sexual act and the sexual energy to stimulate the creation essence that is you, you have a choice in where you use it. You can use it and share it in the sexual act, or you can use it and share it in other creative pursuits that you wish to expand. I'll give an example. Part of my daily practice is to stimulate and cultivate the sexual energy through self-pleasure, self-play, self-touch, but then not always expending that sexual energy within that act, using that energy for then other things I'm doing throughout the day, whether it be business stuff, creating videos, whether it be through, moving my body, whether it be through writing poetry. I'm not unique. We can all do this. And this is probably one of the biggest tools and practices you can use with the sacral space and your sexual energy. Okay, so it's a powerful one. Next up here is the theme within the sacral space of elimination. Okay, so we've talked about emotional balance, sexuality, procreation, and creation. Now the theme within the sacral chakra of elimination. And while we could speak for a while here on physiological elimination, so excreting feces, excreting urine, right? They're a part of the sacral space physiology. I don't want to speak about that. What I do want to speak about is how elimination connects to sexual act and sexual energy. And if you listen to part 1 of this series, in the root center, you heard me speaking about squeezing the pelvic floor and activating that muscle set. Here in the sacral center now, let's expand that idea. Let's expand that conversation and look at how can we add more awareness into the elimination that occurs in the sexual act. Okay, so I'll use a male body as an example because I'm in a male body in this incarnation. When a man ejaculates, it's very easy to fully surrender and just release and let go. And that's beautiful. That's the divine feminine. We've spoken about that today. But within that elimination, we don't usually bring awareness to the fact that it doesn't always just have to be a full release. We can hold, we can squeeze these pelvic muscles, and we can add balance to the release. Meaning, when we engage the pelvic floor and we squeeze during an elimination, in this context, the ejaculation, then we're adding more balance. So rather than the elimination just being release and letting go, we can add in the pelvic floor for squeezing, for adding in dynamics, right? In the sexual act itself, this is how a man starts to separate ejaculation from orgasm. A man doesn't have to have those two together, right? A man can orgasm without ejaculating. So what I'm getting at here is, if we can learn to engage the pelvic floor again now within the sacral space, then the theme of elimination within the sexual act becomes more nuanced, becomes more interesting, is the word that comes in. So, and the female body, we can do this as well, right? We can learn to engage the pelvic floor for more energetic awareness. Okay, so that's a practice I'd recommend for at least men, just to separate the ejaculation and the orgasm. But for females too, connecting into body awareness. All right, next up here, around the sacral space and your sexual energy, is we're going to speak about the breath, because I want to give breath techniques for each of these chakra centers. And this next one here within the sacral space is using breath work, but connecting into toning and the divine feminine. So what I mean by this is when we tune into the sacral area, as I'm sure many of you have experienced within the sexual act itself, vocal toning and sounds and our natural tonal expression is quite beautiful. And for a lot of us, it is involuntary. It just occurs. And again, a beautiful act. But what we can remember is that it doesn't always have to be involuntary. We can have control. We can add in intentional toning and release to our sacral space through breath work. Right? And it could simply look like breathing in. And then as we breathe out, releasing. Right? Or breathing in and closing your mouth. Those are just two examples. And even just doing that has some things moving through me. But it doesn't have to be complicated. And adding in tones within the sacral space. It also has the added bonus when we tone through the breath, connecting into the sacral center, we actually activate our vagus nerve. And for all of you physiology and biology nerds out there, when we activate the vagal nerve, we allow a shift into our sympathetic state, or our rest and digest state. And as I spoke about in the root chakra, very needed for most of us to get out of that fight or flight state. So the tip here, just to summarize this, is adding in tones, adding in vocal toning, vocal expressions, either within the sexual act itself, with yourself, with a partner, or building up to it to expand that vocal expression. And I would also add in, this is another way we can be creative. Right? This is another way that we can stimulate that creation energy that we spoke about earlier. All right, so we have one more topic and theme within the sacral chakra and your sexual energy to hit on. And this is a big one. So if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you have most likely heard me speak about the inner child. And energetically, in my experience, the inner child is expressed through all of your chakras in many ways. And I will be hitting on it in each of them. However, the space and place that the inner child is most active, from my own personal journey and also working with beautiful souls, is in the sacral chakra. The most trauma, the most wounds, the most loving awareness that is needed in your energetic anatomy in relation to the inner child is your sacral center. So if you're going to do any kind of inner child work and you want to know where to start, most likely it's here. Most likely it's the sacral space. So just understanding that in itself can start to bring some deeper healing. But let's speak about the inner child through the sexual energy lens, through the sacral space. And one of the first links to the inner child that we have through our sexual energy is I'd recommend you go listen to my inner child episodes, the first ones that I did, I think episode 6. It's between episodes 5 and 12, the first two. I talked about the core inner child needs. And one of the core inner child needs is healthy sexual expression. A lot of us forget this. A lot of us overlook this. A lot of us think that I become an adolescent, 12, 13, then my relationship with my sexual being starts. And that's incorrect. Your sexual identity, expression, relationship begins as a child, as you start to learn and touch yourself and connect to yourself. The reason that this is important to understand is most of us, myself included, did not have that need met in a balanced way. Most of us did not have the sexual expression and identity of the inner child needs met. It was either suppressed due to shame and guilt and being sinful, right? Religious, cultural, family, etc. Or going back to pornography, it was hyper masculinized. It was pushed into the red, i.e., we were exposed to porn as a child or a young adolescent, and our reference to our sexual being was the extreme visualization and stimulation of pornography. So this need is most likely imbalanced inside of you. So the solution here is to reparent yourself. It's to reparent that little inner child that deserves to have this sexual identity relationship with oneself in a balanced state, right? Where you're not overdoing the masculine, you're not overdoing the feminine with suppression, but you're teaching yourself what healthy sexual relating looks like. Not just it's with another person is important, but what's more important is relating sexually with yourself. So starting to teach yourself, starting to give yourself a framework of what that looks like. Which brings me to the next inner child sexual sacral tip here: self-touch and self-pleasure, which we talked about in the root center, but I'm going to go even deeper now here within the sacral space. Much like healthy sexual expression is a core inner child need, so is touch, self-touch. And I'm going to expand on it and say here, sexual touch. This is a practice that we can start to help soothe our inner child in relation to sexual energy. We can start to get in a better relationship with touching ourselves. And it doesn't have to begin with our genital region. If you feel safe and comfortable, go straight in. But please remember that you have other erogenous zones, i.e., you have other areas of your body that are sensitive and that can be stimulated in a sexual way, in a self-pleasurable sexual way. So it's beginning with those areas, right? Beginning with the front of your body, right? Beginning with your chest, beginning with your face, with your ears, right? There's many of them. You can talk to a professional and ask, but getting into a practice. My practice that I share all the time, that I'll share here with all of you. If you've read my book, you'll know this too. I add healthy sexual touch to myself within my yin yoga practice. And what that looks like is holding a yoga pose or a yin pose. And within that pose, as you're holding it for multiple minutes, stimulating those erogenous zones, touching yourself with the intention of feeling it and allowing yourself to receive pleasure from you, allowing yourself to receive your own sexual energy. So you can feel soothed, so you can feel safe, so you can feel pleasure, so you can feel all the things. Because you deserve to feel all the things. Full stop. There's no criteria, there's no condition needed. So that's a big inner child sacral and sexual energy tip. And for many of you with trauma, much like myself, this is not a 1 to 100 game. This is taking it slowly. This is working with someone if needed. This is making yourself feel safe and taking it a step at a time. Next up here within the inner child and your sacral sexual energy is using your voice. specifically what I mean here in relation to sexual energy through the inner child is using your voice to express your desires. As a child, most of us had our voice suppressed. I gave the example earlier of if you're a boy, maybe you were told that boys shouldn't cry, boys shouldn't be sensitive, boys shouldn't express their emotions. This most likely connected to your sexual desires, your sexual feelings. So a tip in itself is connecting to that inner child or connecting to your younger adult, using your voice to express your desires. This could either be to yourself or it could be to your partner who holds a safe container to receive your desires. You don't have to act upon them. You don't have to take action. None of that is required. Just expressing, just releasing, just letting that energy move through you is healing in itself. Again, being witnessed. I talked about this earlier. Being witnessed in a space of another. So within that space now, you could add in this expression of your desires, expression of what stimulates you, what brings you pleasure. A way to do this by yourself, right? So you don't need a partner to do this. A way to do this by yourself is writing yourself an inner child letter. I've talked about this tool many times. It's in my book. It's in my inner child episodes. Go back and listen to them if needed. But the inner child letter could be done through this intention, through the intention of expressing your desires. So again, going back to the inner child need of healthy sexual balance and healthy sexual expression, you could write a love letter to that inner child and let him or her know what that sexual balance looks like, right? What that healthy sexual energy looks like, telling him or her that it's okay to touch yourself. It's okay to desire this act. It's okay. You are beautiful. You are divine in your sexual expression and identity. Very basic examples, but you get the idea. Writing that letter to yourself, reading it out loud, and if you want to take it further, having someone hold space as you read it. And then finally here, within this inner child theme, within your sacral space and sexual energy, is play and laughter. And play and laughter in itself, just as an act, is healing, full stop. But within the sexual energy context today, adding in play and laughter, especially within your sexual energy interactions, either with yourself or with a partner, is incredibly healing. What does this look like? Right? So instead of a sexual activity being straight, intimate, and straight to the point is what I want to say, which it can be, all those things. It can also be playful. It can also be laughter. It could also be just being in each other's presence, activating these desires of play and whimsy, and that being the sexual act, that being the place in which you are intimate, without any intercourse, without any, you get the idea, without any stimulation in regards to the physical sexual areas. Just that could be your activity. And that would heal. That would soothe. That would allow this energy to move. And we all have access to this. The last thing I would say around this is catching the stories and the beliefs that come up as this is moving. So for me, for example, because of the pornography aspect we talked about earlier, there are many stories and beliefs around sex not being that, sex not being playful, sex not being full of laughter and ease and grace, right? Because of the hyper masculinization. So catching those beliefs, catching those stories, and asking yourself, is this actually true? Or is there another reality that's greater that I can open myself and my heart up to? All right, we did it. A lot of information today, a lot of tips, a lot of tools, a lot of deeper awareness. As always here on the show, I hope this brought you value. I hope this brought you guidance. And please, please, please do not just listen to my words. Take some inspired action on what stimulated you, on what really hit your heart, what opened that sacral space most, and make some changes in your life. Because we will not change. We can hear all these things all day, but when it changes is when we start to embody it. And it's a reminder that I never expect any of you watching or listening to take my word for any of this. I'd encourage you to test it and try it for you, because we're all unique. Some of these things might resonate, some of them might not. But if they resonate, they won't become your reality unless you embody them. So we do that through taking action. So please take action. I'd love to know which comment, which tool, which tip, which practice brought up the most in you. You can leave that in the comments if you're watching live, or in your reviews on Spotify and Apple if you're listening to the podcast episode. But regardless, I send you love, I send you light. And until next time here on the show, I'll see you again very soon. Bye, everyone. Before I leave you today, beautiful beings, I'm so excited to share a special announcement just with you. On the 20th to the 23rd of April, 2023, I and a fellow guest of the show, the beautiful Ali Paws, will be hosting live in Tulum, Mexico, the Cosmic Heart Tour. And I have Ali here with me now in this moment. Ali, I wanted to ask you, from my heart to yours, why should the beautiful souls listening come and join us in Mexico?
Well, when I hear Tulum, Mexico, well, I guess it's a yes for me, no matter what, because I feel like a lot of us in the last, it's been a couple years since we've been through this traumatic, whatever you want to call it. And also those in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly Canada, has really long, hardcore winters, and it can be cold and lonely. And I think a lot of us are craving this community and this healing, sacred space and travel. I haven't traveled in so long. So the fact that we met on Clubhouse like 2 years ago, and the people listening to us in our rooms, our events, have now connected with us, and we have the opportunity to meet and share our gifts together in a beautiful place in Tulum, Mexico, is unbelievable to me. I'm just to the moon. So there's a lot of different reasons. Those are what I'm excited about, as well as being able to share what I call my medicine that has helped me, which is the yoga, the meditation, the craniosacral, and our book that we're birthing. So I think there's a lot of little gifts and nuggets people can get from this experience. I've been doing retreats since 2014, and this healing immersive experience I know the power behind them. I know what goes into them. I know what people get out of them. So I'm just excited for whoever's coming, really. I mean, I'm excited to be actually facilitating something live, because I've been doing everything online. And the fact that I can be with you, my dear friend, I'm ecstatic about it.
So I invite you to join us in Mexico. Join us for some meditations, activations, yoga, craniosacral therapy, a book release, a live Q&A, poetry, and so much more. These spots are going to fill up super quick, because our intention is to make this exclusive and intimate. So please DM me Cosmic Heart Tour on any of my social channels. That's Cosmic Heart Tour on any of my social channels, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and we'll book in a meeting so you can join the love. I'm so excited to connect with you in the flesh. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, Please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Maher, Maher spelled M-E-A-G-H-E-R. Sending you so much love.
Electricast.